Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My name is Amy, and I'm originally from the Derby in the East Midlands. Okay, well, I come from a very small family, and traditionally an English and Irish family, and my family are Christian, but we've never practiced the faith at all. I learnt most about Christianity at school, and I always believed in God. I always thought it made sense that the world around me had a creator, and I found school life quite difficult. I found dealing with the other kids and the teachers as well kind of gave me a really hard time for a few years. And it wasn't until I actually moved to high school that things started to improve. I was getting the support from my teachers, and I'd started to make friends and felt more kind of comfortable within myself. And at this point, like, I was more agnostic than anything else, because of course I believed in God, but in my view, from kind of my earlier childhood experiences, I didn't want to worship God because I just thought God wanted to punish us and make us suffer and make us sad. So I just didn't want anything to do with religion at all. And especially like when I started doing my GCSE in religious studies, we primarily looked at Christianity, and I found that I had so many problems with so many of the Christian doctrines, and in my heart, I just could not accept. Well, I never really came over those difficulties, really. I just struggled just interacting with the other students at my school, and dealing with the pressure as well that was put upon us to succeed. Pretty much from the age of 11 onwards, everything became about exams, and kind of the way I felt about it was, if I didn't pass this exam, then I was a failure. And every time I did well in a test, I would feel like I had some self-worth. I had no self-esteem as a young teenager. I was very self-conscious, and I was very anxious as well, because I'd suffered a lot from bullying when I was very little, and it really did impact me on how I was with other people. So I had enormous social anxiety, and kind of over the years as well, like, I quickly developed depression, and I was diagnosed with it when I was about 15 or 16, and it just got to a point where, like, I didn't really want anything to do with life. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to do my exams. I didn't have the time for it anymore. I didn't see the point of it, you know. Well, from a young age at my primary school, we were taught about Christianity, but I was at an age where I kind of just believed everything that my teacher told me. But kind of as I grew up and I started doing my GCSEs, that was the first time I was really looking at Christianity, like, with a more kind of mature and more kind of critical academic kind of eye. And the biggest problem I had was the issue of the Trinity. Like, it just did not make sense to me that God would almost kind of split himself up into three parts. And kind of from my point of view, like, if God is supposed to be just, and if he wants people to succeed and go to heaven, then the concept of God has to be easy to understand. Any human being, no matter what age or for what country they're from, what race, you know, whatever kind of education they have, they need to understand that concept, because if they don't understand the concept of God, then surely they cannot succeed. And, you know, I just think if you go out and ask any person on the street, I think most people wouldn't be able to explain the Trinity, and they wouldn't be able to understand it, let alone if you had, like, just like a little 8-year-old kid and you were trying to explain it to it. So that was the biggest problem for me. And I think the issue about Jesus alayhi salam being the Son of God, he always struck me as a prophet, and from the parts of the Bible that I had read, I only started reading the Bible when I was about 18, but before that, the bits that I had read, there was nothing that was convincing me that he was more than a man. He was doing things that normal men did. He was praying, he was eating, he was drinking. You know, he just seemed like a normal man who was trying to portray a message, and I found it very difficult to see God in such a weak and, you know, just a weak human being. It didn't make sense to me at all. Well, when I was 17, I met my first boyfriend, and he was actually a Sunni Muslim. He wasn't practicing though. And I was with him for 2 years, and when I was 18 he proposed to me, and we planned on getting married when I had finished university. And he was the first introduction to Islam that I ever had, and he said to me, like, would you ever consider being a Muslim, because he wanted his wife to be a Muslim. And he told me a few things, and I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll go and read about it. I didn't know anything about Islam. I'd heard about things like 9/11 on the news, but to me that didn't make me kind of scared, or didn't make me feel any kind of hatred towards Muslims. I didn't know enough to form an opinion. So I started to read, and I was actually very pleasantly surprised at what I found, and I was actually really impressed with the simplicity of Islam and the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa. So I turned to him and I said, yeah, I would be happy to become a Muslim. And you know, I was doing it for completely the wrong reasons. I wasn't doing it to impress Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like I should have been doing, but kind of in my younger, more naive years, I was doing it to impress him, you know, because he was such a big and important part of my life. I just wanted to impress him, and so I just started to practice it very, very slowly. But what hindered me was basically this relationship that I was in was a very volatile relationship. He was quite abusive with me on various occasions. It was a really difficult time for me to deal with. And basically it just got to a point when the abuse was just getting too much. He just tried to hurt me in any way that a person could hurt you, and I had to leave that relationship, and it broke me, because that was it. That was my entire future gone. I'd planned a wedding, I'd planned a future with him, and all that was gone, and I didn't know what to do now. And like, I just didn't have that strength to hold on to Islam. And I tried, you know, part of me tried. I tried to go to several different Sunni masjids in my area, and actually found quite a lot of discrimination against me. I'd go to the masjid, I'd go into the sisters section, I'd be, you know, modestly dressed, I wouldn't be doing anything wrong, but like the looks and the whispers that I would get from the men at these masjids just made me feel so uncomfortable, and like I just didn't like being there, and I just couldn't wait to get out. And I didn't know why. I didn't know if it was because I was English, I didn't know if it was because I was a woman, I just didn't know. And kind of with my ex-fiance and this experiences with these men, I started to have a negative picture of Islam, and I started to think, well, maybe this is how Muslims really are. And it kind of just left a vacuum in me. I wanted this spirituality, but Islam was gone, so I had to find something else. So, and what happened was, I was at university in my second year, and I had quite a lot of Christian friends, and you know, mashallah, they were such a rock to me during the time after I broke up with my fiance, because I was such a wreck, and even though I was getting treatment for it, like, just the emotional trauma of everything was so great, and they kind of comforted me in a way, and they taught me a bit more about Christianity, and they said, you know, just give it a chance. And I thought, okay, well, I might as well give Christianity a proper chance. And I did. For about half a year, I would say, I was practicing Christianity. I was reading as much as I could. I started going to church, just doing whatever I could. And I just found, like, it didn't help that emptiness. It wasn't helping kind of to heal me in a way. In fact, as the months went on after this breakup, I was getting worse and worse. There were times when I just wasn't leaving the house. I was just so mentally sick and scarred that I just couldn't face the world, and I just wasn't getting any comfort from Christianity, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. I thought it was my fault, you know, that I wasn't getting that comfort. But it kind of took me until kind of the end of the summer, and I realised why it wasn't working for me, and it was because I knew in my heart I didn't believe what my Christian friends believed necessarily. I think, like, even at an older age, I started reading the Bible again when I was 18. Even then, I was still having the same issues. I was questioning myself, is Jesus really the Son of God? You know, is it true, or was he just a man? Because, you know, part of me was fearful about it, because I knew from knowing about Islam, I knew that the greatest sin that you can commit is shirk, and believing in a God other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And, you know, I was scared of that. I didn't want to make that mistake, and I just wasn't certain. And I would read the Gospels, and from what Jesus alayhi salam said, like, there were implicit things that could suggest that he was the Son of God, but they were not explicit enough for me. I felt, you know, this is to do with salvation. God has to be explicit, otherwise it just wouldn't be fair. And then pretty much after I'd read the Gospels and I moved on to Acts and the letters of Paul, I felt there was kind of a shift almost, because up until this point, I didn't really know much about the Apostle Paul. But this shift, it was saying that more explicitly who Jesus was. And I don't know, part of me wanted to believe it, but at the same time, I just felt like I couldn't, in a way, and it was difficult. And I would go and I'd talk to, like, my friends, and talk to my priest as well, and just say, you know, I'm still struggling with this concept of the Trinity. And, like, they spent many hours talking to me about it and trying to explain it to me. They were using things like the egg thing and God knows what else, and it didn't sink in. It just didn't go. And I think the way I practiced as a Christian, I very much practiced as a monotheistic, you know, like, I just kind of depended on God, and I just saw Jesus as, like, an inspiration of how to live, how to treat people in a way, more than seeing him as this godlike figure. It was strange because I began to miss Islam towards the end of that summer. The one day I had a dream, and I was in this masjid that I'd visited when I was in Egypt, and I'd gone to it myself because my fiance was busy doing something else, and I'd gone for Maghrib prayers, and I was just sitting there waiting for the adhan. And when I woke up from that dream, like, I just felt such a sense of loss, like I just missed it so much, and I felt like I wanted to pray again. I missed learning Arabic. I missed fasting. You know, the things that I would complain about sometimes, all of a sudden I was starting to miss. But even then I didn't go straight back to Islam. I was looking into other religions. I actually looked more into Catholicism because at the time I was a Protestant, Church of England. So I looked into Catholicism. I was very interested in their doctrines on Mary, the mother of Jesus, alayhi salam, and I did quite a lot of research into that, and I just didn't find the evidence convincing enough for me. And the issue with the papacy as well, again, it just wasn't sufficient evidence enough for me to believe it. So I looked into other religions. I looked into Judaism, which impressed me, but the thing that kind of put me off was the fact that they don't accept converts. And I just thought, well, you know, if this faith doesn't accept converts, that's not a very good show on God, really, because surely God would want everyone to be saved, not just one group of people. It just doesn't make sense. So I looked into Eastern religions as well, and for a time I was quite interested in Hinduism, and I did so much reading about it. But the only thing is, I would read so many books and I would sit there and think, have I actually learned anything? And the answer would be no, because it was just so complicated and so varied. I just couldn't get my head around it, and I was just like, you know, I just can't do this. And I was just thinking, well, what do I do now? There's nothing else that's appealing to me. And by this time, those feelings of missing Islam were getting stronger and stronger. And I decided, well, you know, when I first learnt about Islam, I did it to impress my fiance. And by this time, I was 20, I'd grown up a lot, and I decided, you know what I should do? I should research Islam fairly and do it with the intention of seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So I decided this one night I prayed 2 rakat and I made dua, and I said, just, Ya Allah, just please help me to have clarity in Islam. Please give me this wisdom to understand your faith and show me if this is the right way for me. So I started reading the Quran again. I started, the way I got most of my knowledge would be from books, and then I'd sit on YouTube and I'd watch so many lectures, hours and hours of lectures. And at this time I was still Sunni, because back from the time when I was with my fiance, I met a few other Muslims. They were friends of his, and I'd mentioned Shia Islam to them, and their response was, don't learn about the Shias. They're disgusting. They're kafir. You know, they do this, they do that. You know, they put me off. So I wasn't even considering it. But this one day, kind of, and I see it as a miracle now, I just sitting on YouTube watching lectures, I came across this one lecture, and from the start I noticed it was quite different from other lectures I'd been watching, because, you know, people were shouting salawat, and at the time I didn't know what salawat was and why they were doing it. And I quickly realised that actually this was a Shia lecture that I was watching. And part of me was just like, maybe I shouldn't be watching this. Maybe I should just switch it off. But out of kind of sheer curiosity, I decided to give it a chance, and I just sat and watched it. And the speaker was Dr. Sayyid Ahmad Naqshbandi, and the video I was watching was discussing the Shia view on the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi. And I was expecting, I don't know what I was expecting. I was just expecting it to be a joke, really, and a just massive insult. But just the way he spoke was with such eloquence and dignity and honour as well. I liked the fact that he was doing academic discussion, but he wasn't cursing anyone. He wasn't, you know, calling the wives in any kind of derogatory names. It was all very respectful, and I appreciated that. And I just couldn't help but just like listen to these arguments and think they actually make sense. I can see where he's coming from. So, but kind of part of me didn't want to believe it, because again, it was this fear. I'd been taught that the Sahaba and the wives of the Prophet, you know, you cannot criticize them at all. Like, any slight criticism, that means that you're a disbeliever in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even though I did believe it, I didn't really want to. And by the end of this lecture, just like, I found it so bizarre, like when they were talking about Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and everyone had started crying, and I was sitting there thinking, why are they all crying? I don't understand. This is really strange. I didn't understand how they could sit there and cry about a man who lived over, you know, 1400 years ago. It was very, very strange. But it was simply because of those arguments that Aman Akshawani made. I decided, well, maybe I should watch a few more of his lectures, and I did, alhamdulillah. And I learned so much. All these misconceptions I had about Shia Islam, they just disappeared. There was a reason why the Shias do what they do. They do it because of the Quran, and they do it because of the Sunnah. And following on from that, I learned about the Bait alayhi salam, and I watched the biographies of each member, and I just really did feel a love, and I felt a renewed sense of love for the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then his family as well. And it was just so incredible and so moving to know these people in such an intricate way. And it made sense to me that the Prophet would not leave his ummah without a leader, because this was the same man who would cry at night for his ummah. He was scared for his ummah. He was scared that people were going to go astray. So why would he, and why would Allah himself leave these Muslims alone without a leader? And when I learned about Ghadir, and just knowing about the life of Imam Ali alayhi salam, it is as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared Imam Ali from the very beginning to be the successor of Prophet Muhammad. And I think just a real turning point for me was just learning what happened after the Prophet died. I realised that I'd been lied to about certain things. I realised that, you know, I'd been to Friday prayers before, and the Imam, he was just like saying, oh, you have to hold on to Quran and Sunnah. And when I learned it was actually Quran and Bait, I had a copy of Sahih Muslim in my room, and I rushed over to go and get it, and I checked and I could see it with my own eyes, and I just thought, my God, I can't believe I've been lied to about this. And then kind of even more severely, when I learned about the story of Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, you know, I had been told by Sunnis that Fatima had died of grief when her father had died. And when I found out what really happened to Fatima, it broke my heart, and I felt completely disgusted with myself that I'd been lied to, and that I allowed people to lie to me. And it broke my heart in so many ways. And I think what resonated me with the story of the attack on Fatima's house was, you know, when her ribs were broken, I just imagined the agony that she would have gone through. You know, I'm a horse rider myself, and there's loads of times that I have fallen off a horse, and I've had a bad fall, and I've just lay there on the ground and just thought, what if all my bones are shattered under my body protector? What am I going to do? Or what if my elbow's broken? You know, in this day and age, I could just go to A&E, but Fatima didn't even have that, and just the suffering that she had to go through, the beloved daughter of the Prophet, it really disgusted me that people were covering that up. And I think after that, the story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam touched me as well, because, you know, Sunnis, they just brush over Karbala, they say it's not important. But when I realised that Imam Hussein was attacked and killed by fellow Muslims, it really kind of shook me in a way. I could see that Karbala was doing like a divide between Islam and what wasn't Islam. And when I knew what Imam Hussein alayhi salam was fighting against, I just thought, you know, I have to accept Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Of course I do. I can't turn away and say that I'm not on Imam Hussein alayhi salam's side, because if I do that, I would feel like that I would be betraying him. I feel like I'd be betraying my Prophet, and I would almost feel like I was on Yazid's side in a way. So the time I decided that I was definitely going to follow the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam was actually during last Muharram. I don't know, I just got to a point where I was watching so many lectures, and I got to a point now, I was watching these lectures and it was just touching me so much that I was getting emotional as well. Like, I would be crying at these lectures and they would affect me so much that I would just think about them all day. I think, like, during Muharram, I focused quite a lot on looking at the character of Zainab alayhi salam, and when I learned of her story, I sobbed for about an hour after finishing that lecture because of what she had gone through. I couldn't believe that one human being could face so much, you know, losing your family like that. I just couldn't imagine it. But the thing that really inspired me, because at this time I was still really suffering with my mental health. I was back and forth to the doctors all the time. They kept changing my prescription all the time. I was on various different pills, and some of them were having really bad side effects on me, and it was just a really exhausting process. But the thing that struck me about Zainab alayhi salam was the fact that even on the 11th night of Muharram, she was praying Salatul Layl, you know, not even an obligatory prayer, but she still did it, and she never complained about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during all that time. And it did make me realise that, you know, the evils that had been done to me in my life, that was not Allah, that was mankind. That if anyone is to blame for the things that have happened to me, it was not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah has always been there. He's always been on my side, and He's always wanted me to find Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. So after that I decided, yeah, I've got to be a Shia, and I decided as well, you know, I'm going to adopt an Islamic name, and I'm going to adopt the name Zainab as well. Not just because of the emotional connection, but the thought as well, and the hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could use me to be to the Imam of our time, Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, the hope that I could be as Zainab was to Hussein alayhi salam, I could be like that to Imam Mahdi, inshallah. So with that process, I decided I wanted to find a masjid. I wanted to find other sisters. And I started looking around, and it was a real struggle at first because I felt so limited, because now I was just looking for a Shia mosque. I wasn't comfortable with going to a Sunni mosque. But anyway, I found a few, and I emailed them because I was too afraid to kind of just turn up. I emailed them, I explained my situation, I said I want to take the Shahada, please can you help me? And one masjid out of all the masjids that I contacted, only one got back to me, and that was the Masjid Al-Hussein in Leicester. And you know, mashallah, they were just so kind. I got an email back from the secretary, and then this secretary put me in touch with one of the sisters there, and we arranged everything. I went to the masjid, and I got to meet the Maulana there and a couple of the sisters, and it was just such a beautiful experience. Like, they were so happy to see me there. They were so respectful and so kind to me. They were just so happy that I was there and that I was considering Islam, and it was just such a remarkable experience. And I walked away from it just feeling so elated and so thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He had provided me for this. And you know, alhamdulillah, I've been able to go to that masjid a few times now, and like, the sisters have just been incredible. I've not had one negative kind of situation with any of the sisters there, young and old. They're just so kind and so generous, and they're just so happy that I'm their sister, and they will do anything for me. Like, they'll give me books, so they gave me like some prayer clothes. It was just, I just wasn't used to it, just going to Sunni mosques and then coming to this Shia mosque. The difference was just incredible, and I'm just so thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I just hope that He will continue to bless this masjid, because it really is a blessing to us.